Welcome to the Hidden Truths. Part 1: Funeral and Dust. Some stories don't begin with love. They begin with the absence of it. I always thought I'd know what to say. At the funeral. To her friends. To the priest. To the dirt. I thought there would be something poetic on my tongue. A line from our favorite book. Some clean, tear-washed phrase that sounded like closure. But I stood there, numb in my black coat and darker thoughts, and said nothing. Anna Elizabeth Mercer, my wife of 17 years, was gone. A car accident. Instantaneous, they said. Quick. Clean. As if that somehow made it merciful. The weather betrayed the occasion. Bright sky. Crisp wind. Even the trees seemed to breathe easier, their leaves gold and untroubled. There was no storm. No gray clouds. Only a deep, endless blue overhead. The kind of sky you propose under. Not bury someone beneath. The cemetery. There weren't many people. That surprised me. Anna had always been social. Not loud, but magnetic in her own way. People liked her. She hosted book clubs. She sent Christmas cards. She remembered birthdays I forgot. But here, at the edge of her existence, only a handful had come. Her boss from the design firm. A few colleagues. An old friend from college who hugged me like she owed me something. No extended family. Anna's parents had passed before we met. She rarely spoke of them. It hit me, standing at the grave, how much of her life I'd never been invited into. And now I never could be. The house. After the wake, the house felt wrong. It wasn't just the emptiness. It was the dust. The stillness. Like everything had held its breath the moment she died and hadn't exhaled since. The coffee mug still sat on the drying rack. One had lipstick on it, barely smudged, a ghost in ceramic. Her scarf hung over the banister. Her book sat open on the nightstand, spine cracked, page 172 marked with a receipt from a downtown cafe. I stood in the middle of the living room, unsure what to touch first. Instead, I poured myself a drink, sat down, and stayed there. For hours. The box. It was the next morning, if you could call 4:13 a.m. morning, when I found the box. I'd gotten out of bed because I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stand the quiet. Or maybe it was the lack of her breathing next to me. Her hair used to fall across my chest when she slept. Now, all I had was a pillow that smelled faintly of lavender and absence. I ended up in the guest room, the one we always pretended we'd convert into an office or a nursery or something. It had become a storage space instead. I was digging through a bin of old blankets when I found it. Small. Wooden. Unlabeled. I almost didn't open it. But something about the weight of it, the way it settled in my hands, made me curious. Inside were notebooks. 4 of them. Black covers. Worn spines. No title. No stickers. No identifiers. I opened the first one. And froze. The first page. I've lied every day for 17 years. That was the first sentence. My hands went cold. The room tilted, just slightly. I read it again, as if repetition would change it. I've lied every day for 17 years. Not always big lies. Sometimes it was just the way I smiled when I didn't mean it. Sometimes it was the way I pretended to be fine when I wasn't. But some of the lies were bigger. And those are the ones that scare me now. I turned the page. If you're reading this, Martin, I'm sorry. I don't know if I'll ever have the courage to tell you these things in person. Maybe I never will. Maybe you'll never find this at all. But I need to put it somewhere. I need to leave breadcrumbs in case I ever forget who I am, or who I was before I became who you think I am. I closed the book. Put it back in the box. Closed the lid. Sat on the floor in the dark. Staring at the wood like it might start bleeding. A day later. I didn't open the journal again until the next night. Not because I wasn't curious. Because I was terrified. Of what I'd find. Of what it meant. Of the voice of my wife on a page, telling a version of herself I'd never met. But grief does strange things. It makes you chase pain like it might bring you closer to what you lost. So I poured another drink, sat in the same spot on the floor, and turned the page. The beginning of her story. Before you, there was someone else. I never told you his name. I told you there was a bad breakup. That was true. But I didn't tell you about what came after. I didn't tell you about the apartment. Or the letters. Or the boy. Michael. His name was Michael. My chest tightened. I didn't know a Michael. Not one connected to her. I kept reading. I was 17. He was older. Not by much, but enough. It wasn't love. It was something else. I thought I loved him. But I think I just needed to be seen. When it ended, I thought the worst part was over. I didn't know I'd be carrying a part of him for the rest of my life. I didn't tell you I was pregnant once. Static. The world fractured a little then. Like a crack across glass. Pregnant? 17? My wife? I stood up. Walked to the kitchen. Opened the fridge. Closed it. Opened a drawer. Closed it. Static in my mind. Questions forming faster than I could silence them. She'd never mentioned this. Not once. And now, buried in a box like a secret no one was meant to unearth. A son? A baby? A past that lived in the same city as me, breathing, growing, moving through the same years unseen? I sat back down. And turned the page. She continues. I thought about telling you after our wedding. I almost did. But I convinced myself it didn't matter anymore. That it was behind me. That he was behind me. But you can't bury things, Martin. Not really. You can cover them. Layer them in laughter and home-cooked meals and soft skin. But they stay. I think that's why I started writing this. Because if I can't say it out loud, maybe writing it will be enough. There was more. So much more. But I couldn't read it all in one sitting. I closed the notebook. Stared at the box. At the second journal beneath it. And then I cried for the first time since the funeral. Not because she was gone. But because I realized. I didn't lose my wife. I lost the version of her I thought I knew. And she'd been a stranger all along. Part 2, the girl I married. What if the person you loved was just the version of themselves they wanted you to see? The next night, I didn't pour the drink. I made tea instead. It felt like some kind of symbolic shift, like I was preparing myself to read not as a grieving husband, but as someone quietly stepping into someone else's shoes, someone younger, someone wounded, someone who had been living two lives inside one body. I sat on the floor again, the old wooden box beside me like a sleeping animal. I ran my fingers along the spine of the journal, opened to where I had left off, and exhaled. After I gave birth, I thought it would get easier. It didn't. I didn't see him. I didn't want to. I told the nurses not to let me hold him. They said it would help. That if I saw him, I'd understand. But I couldn't. I was too afraid he'd look like me. Or worse, like Michael. I signed the papers that same night. I don't remember what I wrote. Just that my hands were shaking. I wanted it to be over. It wasn't. Tracing her. There was something surreal about the way her voice came through the pages. It wasn't the Anna I knew. The Anna I married was composed, thoughtful, endlessly empathetic. She remembered birthdays, sent handwritten thank you cards, hugged my mother every time she saw her. But this voice, this version, was raw. Broken. Honest in a way she had never been with me. I thought I could move past it by becoming someone else. So I did. I went to a new city. Changed my hair. Got a job at that bookstore downtown. That's where I met you. I paused. My hands clenched around the edge of the page. You were kind. And quiet. You didn't look at me like I was cracked. You didn't try to fix me. You didn't ask questions you didn't have the right to ask. That's what I loved most about you, I think. That you loved the version of me I wanted to be. The bookstore. I remembered that bookstore. Dusty, high-ceilinged, the kind of place with jazz on the speakers and mismatched furniture. I was in grad school, working part-time at the university and spending the rest of my free hours browsing second-hand philosophy and pretending I understood Rilke. She'd been behind the counter. Long sweater sleeves. Hair up in a messy bun. Red lipstick that never seemed to smudge. I asked her about a poetry book. She handed me a used edition and said, "The margins are better than the poems." We were married 2 years later. The letters. Sometimes I think about writing to him. Michael. Not to reconnect. Just to know. To see if he's happy. If he has her eyes. I shouldn't call her that. I wasn't her mother. I gave that title away. But it's strange. You walk around knowing a part of you is out there, moving through the world, and you have no right to wonder about them. I never told you. I almost did. The day we signed the mortgage, I held the words in my mouth like stones. But you looked so happy. I didn't want to drop them. A shadow in the house. I put the journal down and stared at the kitchen doorway. Suddenly it made sense. All the time she wandered through that space like she wasn't fully present. All the nights she stood at the window, long after the lights were off, whispering, "I'm just thinking." When I asked what was wrong, I thought she was tired. I thought she was bored. But she was haunted. Not by what she had done, but by what she had chosen not to undo. The second journal. I stared at the second notebook in the box. Same size. Same color. This one, though, had a deep scratch across the cover, like she dropped it and never tried to fix the tear. I lifted it out gently. Opened the first page. It was dated 2 years before our wedding. Another voice. I told the social worker I didn't want to be contacted again. But part of me hoped they'd ignore that. There's a hole in my chest. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it hums. Sometimes it burns. I started writing letters I'll never send. I keep them in a box in my closet. I tell myself that one day maybe I'll give them to him. Maybe I'll explain. Maybe he'll understand. But I think I'm really writing them for myself. The box of letters. A new obsession bloomed in my mind. A box. A second box. Where? She never said where. Closet. But which one? We'd moved twice. And she never brought it up. Never let me help pack her journals. Always said, "I've got this one." I stood. Walked to the hallway. Opened the linen closet. Nothing. Guest room. Bottom drawer. Shoeboxes. Tax documents. And then a pale pink box, wedged between old sweaters. My hands shook. Inside, letters. Dozens of them. All sealed. All addressed to. A glimpse inside. I didn't open them. Not yet. They weren't mine. Not really. And for the first time, I realized how little of her had ever been mine. 17 years of shared meals, shared bed, shared bank account. And still, there were whole worlds inside her that had nothing to do with me. I closed the box. Put it back. For now. The anniversary memory. It hit me later that night, the time she cried during dinner on our 10th anniversary. We were at a rooftop restaurant. I'd bought her flowers. She smiled, but her eyes were distant. When dessert came, she looked at me and whispered, "Do you ever feel like there's a part of you you'll never get back?" I said no. She nodded, then cried quietly into her napkin. I thought she was just overwhelmed. But now I knew better. She was mourning the girl she had buried. The mother she never got to be. The truth she could never unearth. The questions. And now I had questions. Too many. What happened to Michael? Where was he? Was he okay? Did he know? Did he suspect? Did she ever cross paths with him again? Was he close? Was he far? Was he in this city? Had I ever seen him? Met him? Spoken to him? Had I, without knowing, stood beside a boy who shared her smile? Her sadness? Her blood? The obsession? The next morning, I skipped work. I took the journals. The pink box stayed in the closet. I read for hours. Every word she wrote. Every line she never meant to read aloud. The entries jumped in time, no clear chronology. But a picture was forming. Michael had been adopted. She'd been told it was closed, but later discovered it had been mishandled. The records weren't sealed. She had access. She found his name, his family, even his address. She'd written it down, then scribbled over it, torn the page out, burned it. But one line had survived. I saw him once. At the grocery store. He was standing with his mom, holding a cereal box, arguing playfully. He looked happy. So I walked away. The realization. I read that line over and over. And then it hit me. The way thunder hits before the lightning. The boy at the grocery store. The street corner near our house. The teenager she always smiled at on our way to the market. The one she once said reminded her of someone she used to know. He lived 2 blocks from us. I had spoken to him. Joked with him. Held the elevator for him. Michael. Part 3. Who is Michael? Sometimes the truth doesn't knock. It waits just across the hall. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch with a blanket that smelled faintly of her shampoo, staring at the ceiling as my brain turned over images, fragments, names. Michael. He had a name now. Not just a ghost from her journals. Not just ink on a page. A person. A boy who, if the math was right, would now be 21. And if Anna's journal was telling the truth, and I had no reason to believe it wasn't, he was here. Nearby. He'd always been. The flash of a face. The more I thought about it, the clearer the memory became. He lived in the building next door. I'd seen him a dozen times in the elevator. On the sidewalk. Once, he'd helped me carry a case of bottled water up the stairs when the elevator broke. Friendly. Polite. The kind of boy who said, "Sir," without irony. I remembered thinking he reminded me of someone. Now I realized who. Her. The way his mouth curled when he smiled. The eyes blue like hers. The kind of blue that made winter skies jealous. The soft edge of his jawline, like hers in the morning, before she put on makeup or filtered herself for the world. It had been there the whole time. And I hadn't seen it. The journal again. I returned to the first journal. Flipped through the pages. Looking. Hoping for more. And there it was, halfway through. He doesn't know. I watched him grow up from a distance. His mother, his other mother, is kind. Gentle. The kind of woman I could never have been at 17. Sometimes I think he looks at me like he knows me. But he can't. He couldn't. That would be too cruel. I almost said something once. At the bus stop. He was listening to music, nodding his head, and I wanted to ask what he was listening to. But I didn't. I couldn't even find my voice. The bus stop. That stopped me cold. The bus stop. It was at the corner, just 2 blocks down. I used to walk past it every morning on my way to the train. Sometimes Anna would walk with me partway, claiming she needed air or wanted to grab coffee from the shop near the library. I always thought she liked the early air. Now I knew better. She was watching him. Investigation. I spent the next morning searching our shared laptop. Emails. Calendars. Contacts. Nothing with his name. But there was a folder on the desktop labeled Design Archive. She was a graphic designer, that much was true. But the files inside weren't professional. They were personal. A set of layouts, neatly crafted. Titled by date. Each one a collage. Photographs. Snapshots. A boy growing up, year by year. From toddler to teen. Every image carefully arranged. Some were school photos. Others candid. Most appeared to be taken in public, parks, events, parades. One file was titled 18. It was just a single photo. Him, standing under a tree at graduation. Cap in hand. eyes wide with something between joy and exhaustion. It had been downloaded from Facebook. I checked the file info. It had been saved exactly 2 years ago. The social trail. I found the public profile through reverse image search. The name, Michael Langston. Public University. Studying architecture. His bio was simple. Builder in a world of undoers. I stared at the words. Something about them felt like hers. I scrolled. Friends. Classes. Weekend trips. In one photo, he stood beside an older woman, round face, smiling warmly, arms wrapped tightly around him. Her name, tagged Karen Langston. The woman Anna had called. His mother. Not just a phrase. A reverence. Their proximity. They lived in the building next door. I confirmed it by digging through property records. Langston, Karen. Unit 5C. We were 5A. 17 years, and she had lived that close to him for 5 of them. My chest felt tight. Had she planned that? Had she requested this building because of it? Had every "I like this neighborhood" been part of a bigger truth she never said aloud? The box revisited. I went back to the linen closet. Pulled the pink box of letters. Laid them out on the table like a card game. Dozens. Each one marked with a date. None opened. They spanned years. One every birthday. Some on random dates. Some marked with, "Today I saw you." Some with no title at all. Each one addressed to M. I stared at them for a long time. Then, for the first time, I opened one. The first letter. "You were 6 today. You asked for a red bike. I saw it in the store window and wanted to buy it. Just leave it somewhere. Watch you ride it without knowing who it was from. But I didn't. Because I promised I'd stay away. Because your parents love you. Because you're not mine anymore. But in some secret corner of my heart, you always will be. I hope you fall. I hope you cry. I hope you get back up and laugh. That's what being 6 is for. I love you always. From nowhere. Eh?" I folded the letter with shaking hands. Wiped my face. I hadn't realized I was crying. The dilemma. For the rest of the day, I walked through my life like a ghost. Every room in the apartment whispered her name. But not the version I'd known. The other her. The mother. The silent observer. The woman who had lived with a lifetime of pain I'd never touched. And now the question sat in me like a stone in my throat. Should I tell him? A second letter. That night, I opened another. This one dated just 3 months before her death. "You were at the coffee shop on 7th today. Reading. I walked past twice before I convinced myself to go in. I ordered tea. You didn't look up. Your hair is longer now. Your voice deeper. You asked the barista if they had oat milk." I laughed. Quietly. Because I hate oat milk. You looked like me in that moment. Not in your face. But in the way you stirred your drink. Like it held answers. I wanted to say hi. I'm a stranger. But I've known you since you were smaller than a watermelon seed. But I didn't. Because you deserve clean stories. The coffee shop. I went there the next day. The shop on 7th. Sat at a corner table. Waited. Not because I expected to see him. But because I wanted to feel what she had felt. To sit in the same seat where she had chosen silence. Over truth. The thought. And that's when I realized something that broke me in a completely new way. She hadn't been a coward. She'd been brave. Because she'd loved him enough to stay unknown. And now, I wasn't sure I had the same strength. Part 4, The Other Apartment. The most devastating things we hide are not from others, but from ourselves. It started with a sentence. Buried halfway through the second journal, marked with nothing but a line drawn in blue ink. "I kept the key in the lining of my winter coat. The one I never wear when you're home." I stared at the words for a long time. I knew the coat. Thick navy wool, high collar, slightly oversized. She only wore it when she went out for long errands. Or needed air. Always in colder months. I never thought much of it. But now I remembered, it was never in the front closet with our coats. Always tucked in the back of the bedroom wardrobe, zipped into a garment bag as if it needed protection. From time? From me? From her? The coat. I pulled it from the wardrobe like a memory too heavy to carry. Unzipped the lining. Felt inside with trembling fingers. And there it was. A small brass key, worn smooth at the ridges. Attached to it, a plastic tag. Faded blue. Barely readable. But the numbers were still clear enough. 202. And beneath it, Sterling Towers. My mouth went dry. Sterling Towers was a building on the west side of town. Upscale, but quiet. Not flashy. The kind of place where every unit had a view of the park and the staff never asked questions. I'd passed it before. Even commented on its architecture once. Anna had nodded vaguely. Said she liked the lines. The drive. It took me 11 minutes to get there. I drove in silence, my fingers clenching the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. There was no plan. No idea what I'd find. Only questions. And the sick, gnawing dread that whatever lay behind door 202, it would confirm what I already feared. That I had loved a stranger who didn't just keep secrets, she built rooms for them. The hallway. The building's lobby was silent, marble-floored, smelling faintly of lemon polish and old wealth. The front desk was empty. No one stopped me as I walked to the elevator and pressed the button for the second floor. Each chime felt like a countdown. When the doors slid open, I stepped into a quiet hallway lined with beige carpet and abstract art. I stopped at 202. The key slid in smoothly. Turned with a soft click. The door opened. The room. At first glance, it looked like a hotel suite. Clean. Sparse. Light gray walls. A narrow kitchen. A small reading nook by the window. But then the details emerged. A mug on the counter. The kind she favored, thick, ceramic, hand-glazed. A book on the armchair. Spine broken. Corners dog-eared. Her handwriting in the margins. And in the center of the living room, a desk. Minimal. White. On it, a leather-bound notebook. A candle. A framed photo turned face down. I stepped forward slowly, like I was walking through someone's memory. Because in a way, I was. The desk. I sat in the chair. Opened the notebook. Every page was filled with small, tight cursive. But these weren't journal entries. They were letters. To herself. Each one dated, beginning with the phrase, "Dear Anna." As if she were trying to reach the version of herself who had gotten lost. I turned to a random page. "Dear Anna, today you almost told him. You stood at the kitchen sink and thought, if I say it now, maybe he'll understand. But your voice caught. You smiled instead. Poured more coffee. You're still pretending. I'm sorry." Another. "Dear Anna, you are not weak for surviving in silence. But you are disappearing. And I miss you." The closet. I opened the closet next. Inside, a single coat. Her winter one. One pair of boots. And on the top shelf, a shoebox. I pulled it down, expecting old receipts, perhaps another journal. Instead, I found photographs. Stacks of them. All of him. Michael. At school. With friends. Riding a bike. Sitting by a fountain. Laughing with someone just out of frame. I flipped one over. Her handwriting on the back. "He's 17 here. He loves indie music. He smiles like you used to before you became scared of being seen." Another. "He's grown. But I still see the infant I didn't hold." I sank onto the edge of the bed. And wept. The wall. Then I saw it. A part of the wall, painted over, but not quite evenly. I approached. Ran my fingers along the drywall. It felt hollow. I tapped it. And found a seam. I looked around, found a letter opener in the desk, and gently wedged it between the edges. A panel shifted. Inside. Notes. Sticky notes. Torn journal pages. Photos. Diagrams. A full mind map. Of him. Of me. Of her. At the center, one word circled in red pen. Truth? The diagram. She had charted it all. Timelines. Points of contact. Risk factors. Phrases like, if I tell Martin equals divorce? If Michael finds out equals damage? Healing? What if it's not mine to say? And beneath it all, scrawled in heavy ink, what does it cost to be known? The photo frame. I returned to the desk. Picked up the photo frame. Turned it over. It was of me and her. From our second anniversary. We were sitting on a bench in Central Park. She was laughing. I was mid-sentence. Someone else had taken the picture, probably a stranger. She had drawn a circle around our hands, intertwined. And beneath it, in pen. I almost told him this night. But I didn't want to lose this version of him. The version that didn't know I was broken. The air. I stood in the middle of the room. And for a moment I could feel her there. Not Anna the wife. Not Anna the architect of silence. But Anna, the girl who had made a temple of regret and sat in it alone, praying for absolution she never believed she deserved. And I realized something else. This wasn't a love nest. This wasn't an affair. This wasn't a second life. This was her confessional. The decision. I didn't take anything. I left the room exactly as I found it. I locked the door. Returned the key to the coat lining. Zipped it shut. When I got home, I made tea. Sat by the window. Watched the wind move the branches outside like time brushing past us. And I understood something that no part of me had wanted to accept. She had never betrayed me. She had just never believed she was worthy of being known. Part 5. Voices. What if the truth wasn't hidden from you, but from her too? The day after I left the apartment, I woke feeling like I hadn't slept at all. My body ached from exhaustion, but my mind was spinning like a wheel that didn't know how to stop. I kept seeing the wall. The photos. The words circled in red. Truth? I didn't go back to work. I didn't answer emails. I sat in my kitchen for hours with a mug of tea that went cold, my fingers pressed to the edge of the counter like I might fall without it. There was one journal left. I had left it untouched until now. The third book, the one with a green elastic band fraying at the edges. It didn't look like the others. And when I opened it, I understood why. Fragment 1. The handwriting was shaky. Loose. Unlike the tight, controlled cursive of the earlier books. The first page had no date. Just a line. I hear her again. I turn the page. She wakes me up. She moves the mirror. She hums in the shower when I'm alone in the apartment. I know she's not real. I know that. But she was once. And I don't think she's forgiven me. My blood went cold. Fragment 2. Martin looks at me like I'm whole. And I let him. But I'm not. I don't tell him when the blackouts come. When I lose time. When I end up in places I didn't remember walking to. Once I found myself in the park, barefoot, crying, holding a necklace I hadn't seen in years. My hands were shaking. My mouth was bleeding. I don't know why. I closed the book. Stared at the cover. Then reopened it. Fragment 3. Sometimes I hear her voice in my head, Anna, the girl from before. She says things I'm too afraid to say out loud. She reminds me of Michael. She tells me I should have kept him. That giving him away was cowardice, not sacrifice. Other times she tells me I should disappear. That Martin deserves better. That I'm only pretending to be a wife. I argue with her. In my head. But I don't always win. Fragment 4. I think I might be broken in a way that can't be glued. I don't want him to find out. I don't want anyone to find out. I've lived in this house for 4 years and I still hide in the bathroom when it gets too quiet because I think she'll come back. I don't know who she is anymore. or if she was ever me. But I think she's waiting. The hospital folder. There had been a folder in the apartment's closet, one I hadn't opened. I had taken only the journal that day. I didn't want to disturb her space. But now I drove back. I used the key again. Entered quietly, even though there was no one to disturb. I opened the closet, pulled the box down, and found the folder, yellow, old, marked St. Augustine Behavioral Intake. Inside. Intake forms. Therapist notes. Session summaries. Anna had checked herself in for a 72-hour psychological evaluation 6 years ago. Diagnosis: dissociative symptoms, sleep disruption, auditory hallucinations, non-command, trauma-linked identity dissociation. Notes: patient exhibits clear awareness that the intrusive experiences are not externally real but struggles with emotional separation from them. Appears intelligent, high-functioning, capable of masking symptoms effectively in social environments. Refuses medication. Declines extended stay. Requests privacy. She had signed her name at the bottom of every page. I recognized her signature. It was the only part that hadn't changed. Home. Back in my apartment, I placed the folder on the dining table and stared at it. I remembered the times I'd come home and found her staring at nothing. I thought she was tired. I remembered the night she cried in the kitchen and said, "Sometimes I forget where I end and everything else begins." I thought it was metaphor. I remembered how she refused therapy when I suggested it during a hard winter. Said, "I already tried that. It didn't work." She wasn't lying. It had just been a different time. And I hadn't been there. Fragment 5. Today I stood in front of the mirror and didn't know who was looking back. I looked into my own eyes and saw someone who hated me. Someone who thought I didn't deserve the life I'd built. The man who sleeps next to me. The job. The house. The dog. The quiet. I blinked and it was gone. But the echo stayed. She's still there. In the cracks. A question I never thought I'd ask. Was she sick? Or was she haunted? Was the voice a symptom? Or a part of her she never learned to hold? And worse, did I love a woman who needed help and never got it, because she never let me see how much pain she was in? Or because I never asked the right questions? Fragment 6. Sometimes I think if I had told Martin about Michael, everything would have shattered. Other times I think if I had told him about the voices, that would have been worse. Because secrets break trust. But madness? Madness breaks love. The final page. There was no date. No context. Just one page. Written in a hurried, jagged scrawl. I'm sorry. Not for the secrets. But for not letting you see all of me. I thought protecting you meant giving you the version of me you could love. But that meant you never loved the real me. Maybe I never did either. The letter on the fridge. She had left me a note after she died. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. It was short. Just a post-it on the fridge. Milk in the fridge. Don't forget to water the fern. I love you always. I had kept it. Stuck it in the corner of the mirror like a relic. Now I pulled it down. Turned it over. There, in smaller handwriting, almost faded. I hope the version of me you remember is the one who tried to stay. The decision. I didn't call anyone. I didn't run from it. I just sat with the journal. The folder. The silence. And tried to imagine what it must have felt like to live inside her mind. A place where love was real, but reality was warped. Where memory was fragile. Where her own name felt like a stranger. I didn't feel betrayed anymore. I felt grief. Not for what she hid from me, but for what she could never give herself. Part 6. The Child. There are truths you read in journals, and truths you find in ink, stamped and notarized. Somewhere between the 15th letter and the last page of Anna's psychiatric intake folder, I stopped feeling like I was grieving a wife. I started feeling like I was investigating a woman I never really knew. A woman who had been living two lives, one visible, one buried. And if I wanted to understand who she truly was, not just the curated version she let me hold, but the full, fractured self, I needed to do more than read. I needed to verify. A name and a year. From the letters, I had a rough timeline. Anna got pregnant at 17. She gave birth in early spring, April, most likely. The hospital she mentioned once in a journal entry, almost like a footnote, was St. Augustine Memorial, a mid-sized facility on the east side of the city. I'd passed it hundreds of times. She never said she'd been there. But I remembered her staring out the window once when we drove by. Long silence. Then, hospitals always smell like regret. At the time, I thought she was just being poetic. Now I knew she was remembering the day she became someone else. Records. St. Augustine had merged with a larger medical group 3 years ago. Their physical archives had been transferred to an off-site facility. I called the main office. Said I was inquiring about a birth record from 21 years ago. I gave them Anna's full name. I didn't lie, but I didn't tell the full truth either. I said I was her husband, and that I was settling her estate after her passing. The woman on the line was polite. Quiet. She asked me to send over a copy of her death certificate and a signed request for records. I did. 3 days later, a letter arrived by courier. Inside, a copy of a birth record. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. The document. Mother, Anna Elizabeth Mercer. Date of birth, April 5th, redacted. Time of delivery, 3:47 a.m. Gender, male. Name assigned, Michael Aaron. Father not listed. Status, adopted via private placement. Adoption agency contact, Northlight Family Services. Stamped. Signed. Legal. Real. The kind of truth that doesn't come in whispers or journal entries, but in government fonts and black ink. She hadn't lied. She just never told. And now I held the evidence in my hands. Northlight. The agency was still active. Still small. Still deeply committed to sensitive, compassionate placements, as their website said in gentle serif font. I called them the next morning. A woman answered. Her voice reminded me of fresh linen and Sunday school. I told her who I was. Who Anna had been. I said I wasn't seeking to disrupt anything, that I wasn't here to break down any walls. I just needed to understand the past. For closure. There was a pause. Then she said, "This isn't the first time we've heard her name." My breath caught. She called us 5 years ago. Said she didn't want to interfere. Just asked if he was safe. If he was loved. We told her yes. And she thanked us. Then hung up. The records room. They allowed me to come in. Under supervision. No names. No direct contact. But they let me see the file. They had me sit at a desk in a small room that smelled of lavender and worn paper. The folder was thin. Simple. But precise. A single page caught my eye. A hand-drawn family tree, prepared as part of a psychological intake when Michael was 9. He'd been struggling with identity. He'd written, "I wish I knew what her voice sounded like." He didn't mean his mother. He meant Anna. I swallowed hard. This boy, this man, had been aching for the same answers I now held in my hands. We'd both been orbiting the same silence. Confirmation. They confirmed it. Michael Langston. Adopted by Karen and David Langston. No sealed records due to the structure of the original agreement. He'd grown up just 10 minutes from where Anna and I bought our first house. They gave me a brief, sanitized update. He was doing well. College student. Architecture major. Quiet, but kind. Artistic. Smart. Anna had been right. He was okay. But he didn't know. He had no idea who she was. A different kind of grief. I drove home in silence. Not just silence in the car. Silence inside me. I had thought grief was an earthquake, something loud, something that shattered the world. But this? This was like discovering your house had been slowly sinking into the earth for years. And you'd only just noticed the tilt. Anna hadn't destroyed anything. She had built a life on incomplete blueprints. And now I was standing in the gap between what was drawn and what existed. The frame. I took out an old photo from a drawer that night. It was of our first anniversary. We were in the mountains. She was leaning into me, cheeks pink from wind, her smile small but true. I stared at it. Wished she could speak. Not to explain. Just to tell me whether she believed it was still possible to love someone after they've lied. I think she would have said, yes. But only if they learn how to tell the whole truth, eventually. The final letter. I opened one more letter from the pink box. This one was dated 6 weeks before she died. I saw him today. Again. He was sitting at the lake, sketching something. I stood behind a tree like a coward. But I smiled. He's grown now. Taller than me. Has her kindness. My hands. I think he'll be okay. But I hope someday he finds this box. Or something like it. And when he does, I hope he doesn't hate me. I hope he understands I didn't stay away because I didn't care. I stayed away because I did. The question. Now I knew the truth. Michael was Anna's son. He was adopted. He had grown up nearby. He never knew. But I did. And that left me with only one question. What do I do with the truth now? Part 7. The Lie She Buried. Some truths are buried to protect. Some are buried to destroy. And some are buried because we simply cannot survive them. I stood at the window for hours that night. I didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't cry. I just stared at the city lights, each one flickering like the last trace of something trying not to disappear. Michael had a name. A face. A life. And now I had a choice. Do I tell him? Or do I become the last guardian of a secret my wife spent her life trying not to release? The ethics of a secret. In the abstract, the answer is easy. Yes. He has a right to know. Everyone deserves to know who they are, where they come from, what blood pulses beneath their skin. But life isn't abstract. It's messy. Raw. Human. Michael was thriving. He was okay. He had a family that had raised him with love. Stability. Music. Breakfasts. Afternoons in the park. What right did I have, what right did Anna have, to disrupt that? Would this be healing? Or would it be theft? The letter I wrote but didn't send. That night, I sat down at the table with a blank sheet of paper. I wrote, Dear Michael, I'm writing to tell you something that was never mine to say, but was always mine to carry. Your birth mother, her name was Anna. She was my wife. She died 6 months ago in a car accident. And before she died, she left behind journals. Letters. Memories. A map I had never seen. You were at the center of all of them. I don't know if you want this truth. But I needed to offer it. Because not knowing can be a wound too. Sincerely. Martin. Then I folded the letter. Placed it in an envelope. And left it on the table. Unsent. The envelope Anna left me. I didn't expect to find another letter. I thought I had read everything. But grief has a cruel rhythm. Just when you think it has finished echoing, it whispers one more time. It was tucked behind the back panel of the journal box, taped to the wood. Addressed to me. Simple handwriting. My name. That's all. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside. Martin. If you found this, it means you've read everything. Or almost everything. I don't know how much of me you can still love. Or trust. But I owe you one more truth. The biggest lie wasn't that I gave Michael away. The biggest lie is that I never told you, because I thought it would ruin us. But the truth is, I didn't tell you. Because he was already in our lives. And I couldn't risk losing either of you. The fracture. I read that paragraph 5 times before my mind could process what it was trying to tell me. He was already in our lives? How? Where? When? She had watched from a distance. That much I knew. She had followed him, photographed him, wrote to him without mailing the words. But had they met? Had he spoken to her? Had he known? I called the agency. I contacted Northlight again. Asked a question I didn't want to ask. Did Anna ever make contact with Michael directly? The woman on the phone hesitated. Then she said something that chilled me. We're not permitted to confirm direct contact. But I can tell you that Anna was listed as an approved emergency contact in his school file for 1 year. Just one. How? I asked. She volunteered at the school library. Quietly. For 6 months. The family knew her only as Miss Mercer. A retired aunt figure. A helper. Did he know? I don't think he understood who she was. But he liked her. A pause. He once told one of the teachers, "She smells like the forest. Like I remember in my dreams." I couldn't speak. She continued. When she stopped coming, he cried for a week. What did they tell him? That she moved away. And what was the real reason she stopped? She requested to be removed after an incident. What kind of incident? She saw him fall off a swing and hurt his arm. She ran to him, held him, soothed him, and almost said, "Mama's here." Another pause. She left before she could make the mistake. Her final entry. I returned to the last journal. The green one. There, on the very last page, in faint, almost invisible pencil. I saw him today. He smiled at me, like he remembered me from somewhere. Maybe a dream. Maybe a story. I wanted to say everything. But I said nothing. Because I realized. It wasn't my story to end. It never was. The envelope I burned. I took the letter I had written, the one to Michael, and walked to the kitchen. Lit a match. Watched the paper curl and twist and fall to ash. Not out of fear. Not out of shame. But because I finally understood something Anna had known long before me. Some truths are too heavy for those still building themselves. One final visit. I walked by Michael's apartment a week later. He wasn't there. But Karen, his adoptive mother, was watering the plants on the balcony. She smiled at me. We'd passed each other a dozen times over the years. She didn't know what I knew. She just saw a neighbor. I nodded. She waved. And in that moment, I realized I didn't need to be anything more. Closure. I went home. Took the journals. The photos. The box. Packed them away in a sealed crate. Labeled it for later. Not for him. Not for me. But for the version of him that might one day need it, if he ever came looking. The final thought. I stood at the window again. Same city. Same lights. But something inside me had quieted. Not because the pain was gone. But because the echoes had stopped asking questions. Anna had lied. But she hadn't done it to escape the truth. She had done it to protect its most fragile edge. And now I was its final keeper. Part 8. A Message in Ashes. Some goodbyes are spoken long after the voice is gone. It began with a knock. A quiet one. Mid-morning. 3 soft taps. Not urgent. Not uncertain. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door with a familiar weight in my chest, the same heaviness that had followed me since Anna died. Since her words turned our shared life into a puzzle I wasn't sure I'd ever finish. The woman standing on the other side was in her mid-50s. Warm face. Gray sweater. Leather bag worn from use. There was something immediately familiar about her, though I couldn't place it. "Martin Mercer?" she asked. "Yes?" She held out a sealed envelope. "I was asked to give you this. By Anna." My throat tightened. She told me not to deliver it unless something happened. If she didn't come back. I took the envelope. Didn't open it. Not yet. "Who are you?" "I'm her therapist." The cafe. We sat in the cafe across the street. One she used to love. She always said the cinnamon smelled like What forgiveness might feel like if it had a scent. I'd never understood that until now. The woman, her name was Dr. Leah Marston, sipped tea without sugar. She watched me the way professionals do. Not judgmentally. Just thoroughly. She only saw me for 3 sessions, Leah said. But she left an impression. What did she talk about? Regret. Fear. Memory. And Michael? Yes. But not in name. Just an ache. She pulled out a folder. Not thick. Well organized. She gave me permission, in writing, to share this if she passed. If you came asking. The transcripts. Anna's voice filled the pages. Not in handwriting. Not in metaphor. Just words. Spoken. Transcribed. Raw. He thinks I'm fine. He thinks I'm the steady one. But I hear things sometimes. Echoes. Like thoughts I forgot to have. I write letters to a boy who doesn't know me. I dream about saying his name and waking up ashamed. I stopped reading. I didn't know she was still seeing anyone. She wasn't, Leah said. Not consistently. She came once a year. Maybe twice. Like clockwork. Why? She said it was like visiting a grave. But instead of flowers, she left confessions. The envelope. When I finally opened the envelope Anna had left with Leah, I expected another letter. It was. But not to me. It was to Michael. Only this time, it had no filters. No poetic hesitation. Just a voice stripped bare. You may never read this. You may never even know I existed. But I loved you. I loved you in silence. In fear. In every beat of my hidden life. I gave you away to give you a chance. But I followed. I watched. I wrote. I wept. You don't owe me forgiveness. You don't owe me anything. But if you ever wonder why no one came back for you, know this. I never left. I just stayed hidden. Because I thought that was love. And maybe I was wrong. But it's the only way I knew how to survive. The audio file. Leah slid a flash drive across the table. She recorded something. A message. Asked me to give it to you only if you said you knew. Not guessed. Knew. I do. Leah nodded. She wanted you to hear her voice one more time. The voice. I listened that night. Alone. In the quiet of our home, the walls thinner than they'd ever felt, the bed half empty but somehow fuller now that every shadow had a name. I plugged the drive into my laptop. Clicked the file. Anna's voice emerged, soft, shaking. Not her public voice. Not her practiced warmth. Just her. Hi, Martin. If you're hearing this, I'm gone. I'm sorry. I recorded this because I knew the words would fail on paper. They always do. You can edit a letter. You can't edit your own voice. I need you to know. I was never pretending to love you. That part was real. It was the only part that saved me. I wish I could have told you all this in person. I tried. So many times. But I was afraid of what you'd see when the curtain dropped. Not a monster. Just a coward. And worse, a mother who didn't fight hard enough. The breath. There was a pause in the audio. Just breathing. Then, you always asked why I stayed up so late. Why I kept journals. The truth? Because some nights, the guilt was louder than the quiet. And I needed to put it somewhere. Thank you? For loving the version of me I couldn't even love myself. I hope you forgive me. But if you don't, I understand. The audio clicked. Silence. Final. The ashes. The next morning, I took the flash drive. The journals. The letters I hadn't yet opened. The photo of her with Michael, the one she never framed. And I drove north. To the lake. To the spot where we'd once camped, and she'd said, if I ever vanish, this is where I want my soul to rest. Just dissolve me into this. I built a small fire. Fed it the letters. The drive. The unsent truths. Watched the smoke rise. Not to erase, but to release. The message. I didn't tell Michael. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I left the box with Northlight sealed, with instructions. If he comes looking. If he asks. If he wants the whole story. Give it to him. Not because he needs to know now. But because someday, he might need to forgive someone without knowing their name. And maybe this will help. The news silence. That night, for the first time in nearly a year, I slept through the night. No dreams. No voices. No shadows pacing behind the bed. Just quiet. But not the kind that haunted. The kind that held. Part 9. Her greatest fear. There are things we keep secret not because we are dishonest, but because we're terrified that if someone saw us clearly, they'd leave. The fire had gone out hours ago. The ashes were cold. Carried gently by the lake wind into the sky, like weightless versions of what once consumed me. And yet, despite the quiet, I couldn't stop thinking. Not about the secrets. Not about Michael. But about why she had buried it all. The more I thought about Anna's life, the more I realized, nothing she'd done had ever been about escape. Not even the silence. It was about control. It was about building a version of herself that could be loved. And shielding the rest from ever being tested. The closet. When I returned to the apartment, I started packing her things. Not out of anger. Not out of readiness. But because I needed to interact with her physically, not just through journals and memory. Each item felt like a ghost. I folded her sweaters, the ones she wore while reading on the couch. I gathered the jewelry she only wore to social events, never at home. I touched the blanket we once fought over on movie nights. And at the back of the top closet shelf, I found a single envelope wrapped in plastic. No markings. No stamp. Just tape closed. I knew what it was before I even opened it. The final page. Inside, a single sheet of paper. No title. No greeting. Just writing. Slanted. Pressed hard. I have spent so much of my life preparing to be left. Even before I met you, I learned how to armor myself. I built a person that could be admired, maybe even loved, as long as the lights were dim and the questions stayed polite. But inside, I was always watching the door. Waiting. Because if someone ever looked at the whole of me, the mother who gave her child away, the girl who heard voices, the woman who sometimes didn't recognize her reflection, they would leave. And if you had left, I wouldn't have survived it. The tremble. My hands shook reading it. It wasn't a confession. It was a warning. She had been living in emotional survival mode for so long, she hadn't just hidden parts of herself, she had amputated them. Grown a life around the wound. Tended to it like a garden she never let bloom. You never saw the whole me, she wrote. And maybe that's why you could love me. I sat for hours. I didn't move. Didn't speak. I just let her words settle. They weren't dramatic. They weren't self-pitying. They were true. And suddenly it wasn't anger I felt. It wasn't even sadness. It was respect. Because it takes a different kind of strength to carry all that pain and still show up for someone else. To cook dinner. To laugh at a bad joke. To remember birthdays. To wake up beside someone every day and say, I'm fine. When you're not, because you love them more than you trust yourself. A memory. I remembered something strange. A moment that meant nothing before. Now it meant everything. One winter we were sitting by the fire. She was wearing that navy coat, the one with the key in the lining. We weren't talking. And then, out of nowhere, she whispered, Would you still love me if I wasn't me? I laughed. Said something like, There's only one of you, and I'm already stuck with her. She smiled. But now I wonder, was that the moment she almost told me? The underlined book. Among her things, I found a worn copy of The Little Prince. It was annotated, underlined. I flipped through the pages until I found the one she had marked in 3 colors. It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye. And beneath it, in her handwriting, But what if the invisible part is ugly? Her journal revisited. I returned to her earliest journal. The first black one. The one that started with, "I've lied every day for 17 years. I flipped to the end. And there it was, a page I'd missed. Taped to the inside back cover. Small. Torn. As if she'd ripped it from another book. It read, "What I fear more than death is this. That someone will see all of me. And quietly walk away." Under it a postscript. "If you're still here, Martin, you've already proven me wrong." I broke. I finally cried. Not the controlled, cinematic kind. The ugly kind. The kind where sound escapes without meaning. The kind where your hands don't know what to do, and your chest aches in places you didn't know could hurt. I cried because she had been waiting her whole life to be seen. And when she finally was, she wasn't alive to feel it. Forgiveness. That night I wrote in her journal. The green one. Just one page. "I saw all of you. And I didn't walk away." I just wish she'd waited long enough to see that too. What comes next? I don't know what I'll do about Michael. I don't know if he'll ever knock on my door. But if he does, I won't flinch. I'll answer. Not with a journal. Not with proof. Just with the truth. Your mother was scared. And she was strong. And she loved you with a silence that should have been a song. Part 10. The Confrontation. Sometimes the hardest truth is the one you choose not to speak. It happened on a Tuesday. Of course it did. Not a thunderous weekend storm. Not a cinematic rain-soaked night. Just a plain, unremarkable weekday with nothing on the calendar but coffee and quiet. I had taken Benson out for a walk along the riverside path. It was late morning. Overcast but warm. The dog liked it when the world was soft around the edges. We passed a bench I had sat on with Anna once. She'd said the breeze felt like being held by something that didn't need her to perform. I hadn't understood at the time. I thought she meant the temperature. Now I understood everything. That's when I saw him. Michael. The approach. He was sitting alone at a cafe table near the park's edge, legs stretched out, sketchbook balanced on one knee. His pencil moved with effortless focus. His hair was longer now. A bit unkempt. There was a look on his face, not sadness exactly, but the kind of weariness that comes from thinking too much. He didn't see me. Not yet. I could have kept walking. I almost did. But something in me slowed. Like gravity had thickened between us. Benson trotted ahead, leash tugging gently, and as we passed the table, Michael looked up. And smiled. "Hey," he said, like we were old friends. And maybe we were, in some strange, fractured way. The coincidence. "I think we've met before," he said, pulling out one earbud. "You live in my building, right?" I nodded. "I'm in 5C. 5A," I replied. He laughed softly. Small world. I almost smiled. He gestured at the empty chair across from him. "You're welcome to sit if your dog's got the patience." I looked down. Benson had already curled at my feet. So I sat. The conversation. It was natural, somehow. He was easy to talk to. We spoke about architecture. He told me about a project he was working on, a conceptual art installation for an urban renewal elective. "It's supposed to represent the invisible weight people carry," he said. That nearly stopped my heart. "And how are you representing that?" He turned the sketchbook around. A tall, hollow figure, made of rusted metal panels, stood in the middle of a courtyard. Its chest was open, filled with cracked stone. "It looks empty," I said. He nodded. "It is. But heavy." I said nothing. There was nothing to say that wouldn't reveal everything. The moment. After a lull, he said, "Hey, this might be weird, but..." I looked at him. "You ever meet someone who felt familiar?" My fingers twitched. Like, not in a déjà vu way. Just familiar. Like your nervous system already recognizes them. I swallowed. He chuckled, embarrassed. "Sorry. That probably sounds crazy. No, I said quietly. Not crazy. He looked at me for a long second. And in that moment I saw her in him. Not just in the eyes or the jaw or the tilt of his head, but in the way he searched for connection like someone who had once lost it. The ask? You mind if I ask something a little personal? He said. I nodded, slowly. Did you know a woman named Anna? My heart stopped. But I didn't flinch. I did. How? She was my wife. His eyes widened, just slightly. You're Martin? He said it like a name he'd read before. And suddenly I realized. He had found a letter. Or a photo. Or something. Anna had left breadcrumbs. He didn't know everything. But he knew something. My turn. How do you know her name? I asked. He hesitated. Then reached into his bag. Pulled out a folded piece of paper. The handwriting was hers. I recognized it instantly. She used to volunteer at my elementary school. He said. They told us her name was Miss Mercer. I didn't think anything of it until recently. He unfolded the letter. I found this in a box my mom gave me after graduation. It had old art stuff. Photos. And this. He handed it to me. I read. Dear M. You once told me the wind made you feel like you could fly. That's how I always remembered you. I hope you still chase the sky. The crossroads. He said. I don't know why she wrote it. Or who she really was. But something about it felt important. He looked up. I thought maybe you'd know. And there it was. The moment. Everything in me screamed to tell him. To fill in the gaps. To let the silence end. But I didn't. Not yet. Because I saw something in his eyes, a man who still wasn't sure if knowing would heal or hurt. And I had learned, finally, what Anna had known all along. Truth is only a gift if the person is ready to hold it. The choice. I folded the letter. Gave it back. She was kind. I said. That's what I remember. She cared. A lot. More than she let people see. He nodded, eyes far away. Do you think she was trying to say something? I smiled softly. I think she already did. The goodbye. We stood. He thanked me. We shook hands. And for the briefest second, I almost pulled him into a hug. But I didn't. That wasn't what he needed. Not yet. He turned to go. Then paused. Do you think it's possible to miss someone you didn't really know? I said. Only if they knew you better than anyone else ever did. Part 11. The real Anna. You don't truly grieve someone until you understand who they were when they weren't trying to be loved. I used to think love was about familiarity. About knowing someone's favorite coffee order. The way they fall asleep on the couch. The books they never finish. The songs they replay. The way they say, fine, when they mean, I'm unraveling. I thought knowing those things meant I knew the person. But love isn't about knowing someone's habits. It's about knowing their fears, and not walking away. And by that definition, I'm not sure I ever really loved Anna. Not fully. Because I never knew the whole of her. Until now. The box I didn't burn. There was one box I hadn't touched. Not the journals. Not the letters. Not the sealed file marked, for Michael. This was her keepsake box. It lived under our bed for years. She said it was just old cards, photos, ticket stubs. I never opened it. It felt sacred. Off limits. But now that the house was quieter than her silence had ever been, I reached for it. Inside. A movie stub from our first date. A pressed flower from the park bench we always fought over. A napkin with my number scribbled in her handwriting, even though I'd put it in her phone already. And under that, a photo of her as a child. And then another. And another. And a final one, older, her, standing outside a hospital, looking 19 at most, holding a blank envelope against her chest, her eyes wide and raw. There was no caption. She hadn't needed one. Her childhood. There were things she never talked about. Her parents. Her childhood home. Her high school years. She had always said, "It's not worth remembering." But now I knew what she meant. She hadn't meant irrelevant. She had meant unbearable. One journal, the red one I'd only flipped through once, held a single entry dated her 16th birthday. He forgot again. She apologized for his fists. I turned the volume up and imagined my real mother lived on the moon. I hadn't married a mystery. I had married a survivor. The version I invented. I started to think about the way I had always described Anna to others. She's the strong one. She's grounded. Always calm. I'm the emotional one in the relationship. But now I saw the truth. Her calm wasn't peace. It was restraint. Her strength wasn't effortless. It was exhaustion held in check. Her silence wasn't wisdom. It was fear that if she spoke too loudly, something inside her would break. She wasn't the stable half of us. She was the half holding everything together while hiding how much it hurt. Letters to herself. One small notebook, blue, fragile, was filled not with journal entries, but with questions. Do I deserve to be loved if I'm not the person they think I am? What if I stopped being useful? Would anyone stay? Am I beautiful, or just good at pretending I'm fine? Each question was answered. Not by me. By her. In a different pen. A different slant. As if she were answering herself. Yes. Maybe. You're more than enough, but you don't believe it yet. It was like watching someone teach themselves how to be whole. Her real voice. She'd written one entry that stopped me entirely. I read it 3 times before I could put it down. Martin doesn't know this version of me. The one who cries in grocery stores for no reason. The one who freezes at the sound of children laughing. The one who sometimes whispers her name just to remember it belongs to someone real. But I love him. Not because he saves me. But because, for a while, he helped me forget I needed saving. And maybe that's why I can't tell him everything. Because if he stops loving the version of me he knows, I'm not sure the rest of me could survive. The notebook I started. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I picked up a notebook, opened it to the first page, and wrote, Anna, I used to think you were the anchor in our story. Now I see you were the boat. Always drifting, but still trying to stay above water. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't ask more questions. I'm sorry I confused quiet with peace. I'm sorry I loved the version of you who smiled more than the version who stayed up wondering if she was broken. The kitchen table. I sat there until sunrise. The light through the windows hit the table where she used to drink tea. I could still picture her there. Slippers. Legs tucked under her. Hair pulled back. Book in one hand. The other tracing the rim of the mug. I used to think she looked so at ease. Now I knew she was reminding herself to stay visible. The realization. I hadn't lost my wife. I had just never held all of her. But she had given it to me anyway. Piece by piece. Page by page. Memory by memory. And in doing so, she had done something most of us never do. She had told the whole truth, even if it came too late to say out loud. The decision. There was one more step. I knew it. A quiet one. Not for Michael. Not for closure. For her. I printed a photo of Anna, one I'd never framed. It was candid. She was laughing. Head thrown back. No makeup. A moment not meant for sharing. I wrote on the back. You were enough. You were never too much. You were real. And I love all of you now. I folded it. Slipped it inside the pages of her last journal. And closed the cover. Part 12, final page. Sometimes the story doesn't end with answers. It ends when you finally stop asking. She told me once, offhandedly, that if she could live anywhere, it would be by water. Not the ocean, too loud. Not a pool, too sterile. Just water. A lake. A river. Something that moved, but didn't demand attention. Something with a rhythm she could match when her mind got too loud. She said, "I think if I sit by water long enough, I remember who I am." At the time, I laughed and said something like, "So I'm just background noise until you meet a lake?" She smiled. "But I see it now. That wasn't a metaphor. That was a roadmap. The lake. It took me 2 hours to drive there. The lake wasn't anything special. Not the kind of place featured on postcards or curated Instagram feeds. It had cracked benches, a crooked dock, a trail that looked like it had stopped being maintained a few years back. But it was quiet. And when the wind blew, the water rippled just enough to remind you it was alive. I found a bench half-shaded by a leaning tree. Saturday. Waited. Not for her. Not for a sign. Just to listen. To match her rhythm. The journal in my lap. I'd brought only one thing with me. Her last journal. The green one with the fraying spine. It wasn't full. The final page she'd written, the one I thought I'd already read, had space beneath it. A few blank lines. And now, sitting by the lake, I understood what they were. Not an accident. An invitation. I opened my own pen. And wrote. "Anna. I came to the place you always talked about. I don't know if this is the right lake. But it feels like yours. The air moves differently here. The quiet doesn't echo. It breathes. You said water helped you remember who you were. I think that's what I've been trying to do too. I used to think I lost you. But the truth is, I never truly found you. Not the whole of you. And now that I have, now that I've heard every word, seen every shadow, I just want to say thank you. Not for the love, but for the honesty. Even if it came wrapped in silence. Even if it took death to speak it. Letting go." I sat there long after I stopped writing. The sun drifted low across the water, casting light that looked like memory. And then I did something I hadn't planned. I tore the page from the journal. Folded it. Walked to the dock. Kneeled down, the wood groaning under my weight, and pressed the letter flat against the lake. The paper drank the water slowly. The ink began to fade. The words dissolved. Not vanished. Just returned. To her. To whatever part of the world still held her shape. The return. I drove home without music. The road didn't feel like it was leading away. It felt like it was circling back to something more complete. I passed the bookstore where we met. The street where she once said she might open a tea shop. If the world ever made space for people like me. I smiled. She had never needed a shop. She had already built a sanctuary in silence. And left it for me to inherit. The apartment. When I walked back into the apartment, the air felt different. Not haunted. Just lived in. I fed Benson. Made tea. Lit a candle, the one she used to call the smell of soft endings. Then I sat at the kitchen table and opened a new notebook. The first page read, "You don't owe someone all of yourself to be loved. But if you give them the real parts, even the broken ones, and they stay, that's where home begins. Michael. He hasn't come back yet. Not really. But I know one day he might. And when he does, I won't open with a secret. I'll open with a question. What would you like to know? And I'll wait. For whatever he's ready to carry. And if that day never comes, that's okay too. Because Anna left the answers. And she left the space for silence too. The real ending. I thought the story ended with her death. Then I thought it ended with the journals. Then with Michael. Then with the lake. But the truth is, there is no ending. Only a folding. A soft place to put what no longer needs to be solved. Love isn't the opposite of mystery. It's what remains when mystery doesn't scare you anymore. The final page. I went back to her green journal one last time. Turned to the last clean page. Wrote, "This is not the end. Just the moment I stop asking for more. And start saying thank you. For the truth. For the ache. For you." And I closed the book. Thank you for being with us on the Hidden Truths. If you enjoyed this, leave a like, drop a comment, and be sure to subscribe. The secrets are waiting to be revealed. See you soon.